see how great is our God. Beautiful singing. Have a seat. Amen.
I got to share with you something I shared with the second service, and I was just thinking it again here. By my count, rough estimate, there's 11 people that were involved in leading worship today, either from the stage or back in the booth, between the three services. 6 of them are in high school or college, and 3 of them have been here since 7:30 this morning. Those Spencer back in the booth, Kylie been here since 7:30. Well, 8. That's just awesome to me. It's incredible, and I'm so thankful that students are stepping up and providing leadership here at this church, and I love that they have the opportunity to do that. I was thinking of that when you were standing there singing. I was like, you led in the first service, and here you are at 11 worshiping with us still. We're in a series called A Noble Task right now, Leadership in the Church. It's based on 1 Timothy chapter 3. And last week I spent, 20 minutes talking about 1 Timothy chapter 3. And then we did, at the end, I had 7 minutes on the leadership structure of Murray Hills, like what's it going to look like moving forward. And then about 3 minutes on the cereal drive. And then I asked for feedback, comments, questions, concerns, which would help me draft the rest of the series. I received one question on the elders. What are the qualifications? And I said, no trouble. We'll cover that this week. I received probably a dozen questions about the cereal drive. So 10 times more questions about cereal than elders, which told me either A, I did an incredible job of explaining things. I was so thorough and complete that you have no questions, no comments, no concerns about the leadership of the church. Or B, you care more about cereal. And I'm not entirely sure which one it is, but if it's the latter, that's okay. We're perfectly okay with that because cereal is important. What we're doing for this cereal drive is more important than you realize. We're having fun with it and we're joking and all that kind of stuff. But Kathy Stoltz responded when I sent the email out to the church, like they're great, vote Frosted Flakes. Kathy Stoltz works at the Family Center, and she sat back and she said, you don't know how bad we need this cereal right now. We're splitting up boxes for families right now. So we can't give a whole box to a family. When they come in, we can't give them a box of cereal. We got to split it up into baggies. And so we definitely need this cereal. And you guys have come through, and I know you want an update because you're the 11 o'clock service, so you get an update. For the first 2 services, Honey Nut Cheerios has been in the lead. And don't applaud that. Who is that? I can't see with these lights. No, Honey Nut Cheerios has been in the lead. Then, at the beginning of third service, my dad came in with a case of Frosted Flakes. So it was like, hey, yeah, look at here. Now we're getting somewhere. Then I was in that hallway back there, and they said, hey, the flags just came in, and they voted for you too. I got to show you this real quick. So I was excited. Frosted Flakes is going to win. So I went back, and the flags, there was one box of Frosted Flakes, and it said, 1 vote for Russ. And it was sitting on 2 cases of Honey Nut Cheerios. It said 28 votes for Sherry. So I see how this is. But thank you so seriously. We're having fun with the cereal drive. It's needed. And if you didn't get it before the service, go pick it up right after service and just run back over here. People are usually here till 12:30, 1 o'clock or something like that. Their small groups may be meeting here. Go pick it up and run it back over here. All right, let's talk about the things that you don't care about as much. Let's talk about elders. We're in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and this is an important series. Okay, I know some of you think, I don't really, just can we get back and just talk about Jesus? And can we talk about, there is a time that churches have to pause and talk about leadership within the church. It's important because it determines the direction of the church. And so we're taking 3 weeks to do that, and today I'm going to answer what I believe is the most important question of the series. So we've dealt with 3 questions. The first one was, what does a leader do? And then today's what a leader is. And then the last week is what about women? Because it seems to be, it's a little ambiguous in the 3rd chapter of 1 Timothy. And then there's some stuff in the 2nd chapter of 1 Timothy that makes you think, what's going on here? So, and that's the one you're probably most interested in because that's the most controversial question in this series. The most important one is today. who is a leader? What type of qualities and characteristics do leaders possess? What type of person should we consider as we consider leaders for the church? And we're considering two types of leaders here, and they're both based on 1 Timothy 3. The first one is that of an elder, and the synonymous terms in 1 Timothy are overseer or bishop, but we're using the term elder. And we already have elders in place at this church. We've had them, the church is almost 18 years old, and we've had them I think we chose elders before we even hired a minister. So elders have been in place for the entire life of this church. They'll continue to be in place, but we're looking to add some. We need at least 2 or 3 more, and at least one from Spring Hill. So we're going through that process. Elders are responsible for leading and overseeing the church, regardless of where it meets. So they're overseeing both campuses of the church. Campus shepherds is a new one that we're adding, and it's similar to deacon, although we're trying to stay away from that word because, ironically enough, the word deacon implies a position of power or authority, and that's not what it was supposed to imply. In the New Testament, the word deacon implies servant. It was not somebody that's providing oversight for the church. It's simply a servant of the church. So we're kind of going with campus shepherds with the idea that that's what we're asking those people to specifically do, is to provide shepherding for each campus. And it's kind of like Acts chapter 6. If you're familiar with that story in Acts 6, as the early church was growing, there were some people that were being overlooked. So the structure began to grow, and some people began to be overlooked, and some people began to complain about it to the leaders of the church. And the leaders got together and said, how are we going to resolve this problem? They said, okay, we're going to appoint some people specifically to meet these needs so that we can focus on other needs, and that way the church will continue to be taken care of. And it says that when they did that, it doesn't call them elders, it doesn't call them deacons, but it says that when they did that, the church began to grow and more disciples were added. And that's kind of our hope here too, that as the church has changed and evolved over the years, that we're hoping that by adding this new structure, we're able to provide and meet more needs for that. So let's talk about the who question, because that is the most important one. The New Testament doesn't spend a lot of time on what. It doesn't spend a lot of time on how. It spends most of its time on who. But even that gets a little confusing, because if you got a Bible with you, 1 Timothy 3, there are, according to my count, in this chapter, there's only 16 verses. Only 13 of them talk about the qualifications, and I counted 24 different qualifications in those 13 verses. So if I'm thinking, like, hey, we need help finding leaders, who would you recommend as a leader? And you're saying, well, what kind of person are you looking for? And I'd say, well, we're looking for that kind of person right there. If you can find somebody like that, upright, holy, not a recent convert, not a lover of money, not quarrelsome, not violent, but gentle, able to teach, respectable, temperate, doesn't produce a sign. 24 different qualifications. Now, I stole that chart right out of my study Bible. You can see it right here. It's color-coded in my study Bible, and it takes up most of the page. It says qualifications for elders and deacons. And as I was preparing for this message, I thought, I don't like that chart. I don't think that's a good idea. And there's several reasons why, okay? One of them is, I don't think this is what Paul intended. It's just a guess on my part, but I don't think that's what Paul intended. When he was writing a letter to Timothy, who's leading the church at Ephesus, I don't think he intended to say, let me give you a checklist. Here's the 24 things that you need to consider in choosing leaders. I don't think it was meant to be a checklist. I don't even think it was meant to be comprehensive or exhaustive. I think anytime, and Paul is famous for lists in the New Testament. He lists sins in different places and all that. I don't really see any of Paul's list as intended to be exhaustive list. I see it more of kind of describing characteristics the same way you would if you were hiring somebody at your business or the place you work. If the place you work was hiring somebody and they said, well, what we're looking for a new general manager at the company. And they said, well, what do they do? Well, here's the job. And they describe, well, what kind of person are you looking for? Well, I mean, they need to be honest, need to have integrity, they need to be able to work good with people, have a good attitude, they're hardworking, they show up on time. You might come up with a dozen different qualifications, so to speak. Like, you're just kind of thinking through, here's the characteristics or the qualities I'm looking for. Not intending it to be a checklist that you mark off and say, well, there may be some that are really important, like, gotta have this one. But just kind of describing, not a whole list in a chart, just saying, here's kind of a general idea of who we're looking for. This is kind of the qualities that we think would be important to be successful in this job. And I think that's what Paul's doing here. The other thing is we get a little too legalistic with this, and they did in this chart where they split it up as elders and deacons and elders and deacons. So they said there's some things that Paul mentioned only in regards to elders, there's some things he mentioned only in regards to deacons, and then there's some things that he mentioned for both elders and deacons. And I don't think that was his intent either. I don't think he was trying to say, now here's the rules for elders and then here's the different rules for deacons, because it just doesn't make logical sense. If you look at that list and you say, okay, well, it has on there an elder should not be quick-tempered, but he doesn't say anything about that with deacons. So therefore, if you're got a really bad temper, you probably ought to be a deacon instead of an elder. Right? Or it says, an elder should not love money, but it doesn't say anything about deacons. So if you're real greedy, you probably ought to be a deacon and not an elder. Or flip it around, the sincerity. A deacon's supposed to be sincere. So if you're an insincere person, elder, that's probably what you need to do, because it doesn't say anything about that. But deacons, y'all really need to be sincere. You see how that, and we've taken it to some silly extremes. We in the church, I heard one person explain, it says an elder should not be given to drunkenness. And it says a deacon should not indulge in much wine. And so I heard somebody explain, well, an elder can't drink, but a deacon can drink a little. And so that's not what he's saying. Okay, we're kind of getting a little too legalistic with it. I think what he's saying here is he's ticking off quality. So, hey, Timothy, as you consider leadership in the church, and leadership was needed in the church because there was false teaching in Ephesus, and it was really important that Timothy add some leaders into the church. As you consider leaders in the church, here's some things you ought to think about. Somebody who's able to teach, somebody who's hospitable, somebody who's self-controlled, somebody who's got a good reputation. And he says, when it gets to deacons, he says, in the same way. Meaning everything he just said about elders is still for in the same way, here's some other things. And then when he gets to women, he says, in the same way, here's some other things. And so I think he's kind of just talking about it, again, a general picture of the qualities and characteristics. And the last 10 years, I've really worked hard to say the qualities of a leader versus the qualifications of a leader. And it kind of means the same thing, but if you grew up in church that kind of really hit these qualifications hard, I know some churches kind of would pass out a chart like that when they were choosing leaders. Like, here's the chart, here's the check marks, mark them off. And there's nobody who's qualified. I can tell you right now, we got nobody at Murray Hills that can serve that's going to hit these 100%. Like, we're going to hit every single one of them. All right, so that's not really a good way or a good system to do that. And so Lynn Anderson talks about in his book on church leadership, he says, stop using qualifications. And he gives 3 reasons why. He says qualifications force us to think more mechanically. We don't think of the person as human. We just kind of think, do they meet the specs? And he said qualifications force us to think more negatively. The emphasis is not on what would make them a good leader, like what are the strengths and character traits and qualities that they possess that would make them a good leader of the church. The emphasis is on, was there anything that disqualifies them? And that's, some denominations have had a really strong history in that, because that was the way they did it, actually. They said, here's the people we're proposing as leaders for the church. If anybody has anything against this person that would disqualify them from serving, please tell the elders. And so it's kind of like a blackball system, that you had. And so it forces you to think negatively. Instead of thinking, what would make them a good leader, you're thinking, is there anything in there that disqualifies them? And then the last one is just forces us to think more narrowly. We tend to think, and I'm guilty of this, when we talk about leaders in the church, we go to 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1. And we just camp out there in those passages. That's not the only passages that talk about leadership in the church. Acts 20 talks about leadership in the church. Hebrews talks about leadership in the church. 1 Peter talks about leadership in the church. The Gospels themselves talk about leadership in the church, because Jesus is the chief shepherd. If you're choosing shepherds or elders, you ought to choose somebody that has the heart and character of Jesus. So maybe we should have spent the entire time in the Gospels as we talk about who we should choose as leaders for the church. So that's some problems with the chart. Okay, I'll put that chart right there. It's too far back. I can't get back there. That's some problems with the chart. The question is then, how should we think about it? What is the proper way to think about this? And I think the best way to think about it is not charts and checklists and that kind of thing, but just as a picture. Like, think about Paul in 1 Timothy as providing a character sketch for a leader. Think about it in that. He's just describing, just like if I was to say to you, when you think about leaders in the church, what kind of person should that be? And you just, well, you'd want them to be spiritually mature, and, you'd want them to be respectable. And, yeah, you wouldn't want somebody that's going to fly off the handle about stuff. You want somebody that's kind of even keel. If you just start, and I think that's what Paul's doing, is he thinks about the situation in Ephesus, and he's writing to young Timothy, and he's saying, I know you're getting ready to appoint leaders. If I don't get there in time, you're going to be responsible for this. Here's the kind of people you ought to look for. So I think the best way to do it is to just kind of read through the list and just ask as you're reading it, who do I think of? I mean, I think that's the way to do it. And it's reading it as a description, just like when you read a job description, if you're looking for work and you read a job description somewhere, you don't usually pick it apart. You just kind of read through it and go, okay, yeah, I'm interested in that, or no, I'm not interested in that. So, it's just reading through the list and saying, who really fits that? And so we're going to do that. I'm going to read through it one more time. We read through it all last Sunday. I'm going to read through it again. And this time I'm going to read through it out of the Message, just because it says it a little differently. And I want to challenge you, if you've been here for any length of time, I know some of you are new and you're like, I don't have any names. That's okay. But if you've been here for a little while, regardless of whether you remember or not, we're asking your advice on who would be good leaders at this church. That's the way you need to think about this. This is not a popularity contest. It's not a vote. It doesn't matter how many nominations a person gets. I'm just simply saying, who do you know that's here at this church that would be good in these roles? And you say, well, what kind of characteristics should they have? Well, these right here. So think about this. As we're reading through these, think about people in your small group. Think about people in ministry, people who may be teaching your kids right now, people who you see serving in the church, people whose opinions you respect, people that you would go to for counsel and advice, people that you would want to come see you if you were in the hospital, or if your family was going through a crisis, you'd want that person to come pray with you. If you were struggling with something, there might be somebody you would go to say, hey, how do I deal with this situation? As you think about those names, here's some of the qualities that they should possess. It says a leader must be well thought of, committed to his wife, cool and collected, accessible and hospitable. He must know what he's talking about, not be overfond of wine, not pushy but gentle, not thin-skinned, not money hungry. Will you advance it for me, Justin? This is not working here. He must handle his own affairs well, attentive to his own children and having their respect. For if someone is unable to handle their own affairs, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a new believer, lest the position go to his head and the devil trip him up. Outsiders must think well of him, or else the devil will figure out a way to lure him into his trap. The same goes for those who want to be servants in the church. Serious, deceitful, not too free with the bottle, not in it for what they can get out of it. They must be reverent before the mystery of the faith, not using their position to try to run things. Let them prove themselves first. If they show they can do it, take them on. No exceptions are to be made for women. Same qualifications. Serious, dependable, not sharp-tongued, not overfond of wine. Servants in the church are to be committed to their spouses, attentive to their own children, and diligent in looking after their own affairs. Those who do this servant work will come to be highly respected, a real credit to this Jesus faith. And as you hear that description, and you probably want to go home and read that again, or read it in some other translations. You hear that description, there's likely a name or two that comes to mind. It may not even be somebody in this church. Okay, I'm just saying, you may think, well, you just described my grandmother right there, or you just described my grandfather right there, or you just described my pastor. When I was growing up, I had a pastor. Wow, that was pretty much the description. That's what it's talking about. What are those qualities and characteristics? Because we need some people in this church that possess those qualities to step into these leading and serving roles in the church of elder and campus shepherd. And we're not asking you to split those up for us. We're not asking you to make that determination, okay? We're just asking for names, and the leadership of the church then kind of looks at that and says, and you know how they'll make that determination is largely by giftedness. And passion and those things. There are people in the church that are gifted with the gift of leadership, that are gifted with the gift of administration. They are. There are people in the church that are gifted with the gift of compassion or gifted with the gift of service. People who have a pastor's heart would be a great fit for a campus shepherd. And that's even a better way to think about it, rather than just thinking about, well, who fits that, and we'll go ask them to start doing it. Better yet, just identify the people who are already doing it, and let's get them on the team. I mean, that's really all we're talking about. Like, just because people who have a heart for pastoring, they're already doing it. You don't have to call them something for them to do it. They're already doing it. And that's the easiest way for me to think about it. I can think of names in this church like, if something's going on with somebody, I know these people will be there. I know these people will care. I know these people will be praying about it. I can think of those. There are people that we call on as ministers. We run into situations sometimes we're like, well, we need, and I'm being careful not to mention any names because I don't want to, skew this or anything. But I mean, there's people who say, well, we need to call so-and-so. We need to call this couple. We need to get them over there because I know they would go and they would be a part of this. And those are the folks that we want serving on this campus shepherding team, so that we can better meet needs in the church as a whole. So, here's the way we're going to do it. We're taking names starting today. So, you can write them on the back of the communication card today. As the offering comes around, you're welcome to drop them in there. We hadn't got a lot of names that way. That's okay. You can send me an email, russ@murrayhills.com, or Tim an email, tim@murrayhills.com, and we'll do that way. Or next Sunday, we'll do it again. We'll continue to take names next Sunday. We hope to have all the names by the end of this month. Then, starting next month, we go through a little process. I don't even know what we call it anymore, but we go through a process where our current leaders meet with prospective leaders, and we kind of make sure that we fit and everybody's on the same page and willing to kind of move forward together and those kinds of things. And then August, we hope to have these in place. So that's kind of where we're going from this point forward. But start thinking about names, send those down to us. If you got questions, start sending those questions to me. Or if you just want to debate cereal with me on social media, I'm happy to do that as well. So it's no problem. However, whatever direction you want to go in, I'm good. All right, we're going to take our offering. Would you guys that were asked to maybe help with that, go back to the back and start passing that? And as they're doing that, let me mention just a couple more things, and then I'm going to close this with a word of prayer. But, of course, the giving there, you can give via these buckets. You can drop your communication cards in there. You can also give by text. And we've had some questions, and I don't say this enough, but if your card expires or you get a new number or you switch banks or something like that, the way you reset your card number on text giving is type the word reset, text reset to that number. And that'll erase all your card information. And then you can start over next time. So you just text reset to that number, and that gets you started. Online, you can set it up. All that information's there as well. Or you can give the old-fashioned way. You guys go ahead and just drop it in the buckets there. What else do I need to tell you about? Not Summer Splash, although that is a cool graphic, I gotta say. Scott's you've been bringing it on the graphics lately. I like the mountain graphics and all the nature graphics. I like that. That's cool. Probably people don't think about who does that, who picks those things out. You've done a great job with that. Bring cereal. I do need to tell you that. Go get your cereal. Bring it back here if you haven't yet. And then next Sunday, we're going to wrap up this series dealing with the controversial question, what about women? And if you want to kind of prep for that, study for that a little bit, you can go back and read the second chapter of 1 Timothy because that's where kind of the controversial passage is. And then we'll kind of put that in context with the third chapter of 1 Timothy and kind of figure out. Now, I'm going to do this in 25 minutes next Sunday. The last time I preached on it, it took 7 weeks. But I really think I've got my answer down to 25 minutes now. So we're going to talk about it in 25 minutes next Sunday. And then after that, guess what comes next? Did you talk free solo in here? Because I missed this service. Most of this service I missed. I was tied up. Free Solo is on the short list for the movie series. So I've seen Free Solo, and it's incredible and scary, and I'm not sure what I think about it yet. So I'm trying to decide if it's going to make it. Movie series starts July 7th. So be ready for that. We'll start introducing the titles really soon here so you can start watching those movies. All right, I've talked long enough for us to take collection, so let's... Oh, I said I was going to pray, didn't I? Let's pray. God, thank you for today. I pray that everybody has a great day today. We go out from here and we go out to serve and to be light and salt to the world. So go with us as we go out of here, Father. Amen.